The gentleman yields. Mr. Burchett, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if my questions have already been asked as the 435th most powerful member of Congress. Sometimes that happens, but when I ask them, I want you to respond. That's very thought-provoking, even though you probably answered it 3 times already, if that's all right, sir. Is there any way that the U.S. can provide aid to Afghanistan without any of it falling into the hands of the Taliban?
No.
That's what I like. Fred Thompson said, "They'd never be afraid of a one-word answer."
It's impossible.
He was a great communicator. Are you able to track United Nations funding to the Taliban? And if so, how much aid in American dollars?
We're trying to do it, as I did mention before. We've actually documented about $10 million, and I'm not certain if this went through the UN or other NGOs, but $10 million in fees and taxes that's gone to the Taliban.
Okay, and that is through UN dollars that are American dollars.
Well, it's American dollars, and
right.
Yeah.
Okay, $10 million. What sort of military equipment is now in the hands of the Taliban, and what do you think the value of that equipment was when it was left?
We did a report on that estimate of how much material was left, and it was basically based upon a report done by the Department of Defense. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it's multiple. $7 billion in equipment, and that includes everything from airplanes to guns to bullets to boots to you name it. So it's a massive amount of equipment.
7 billion?
Billion with a B.
Yes, or 10 million for United Nations and 7 billion in armaments. Okay. And we've been told that the Taliban has more moderate members now, which I don't know that I believe that or not, but do you believe not allowing women and girls out of the house is moderate?
No, I would not believe it's moderate. It's basically a slave state over there. The women are the slaves. So, no. I mean, there are moderate compared to, it's like comparing Attila the Hun to somebody else. I mean, it's
You've got
moderate.
suicide bombers, and then you've got those that would just
just to kill you the normal way.
A hand grenade kind of thing. Yeah, I got you. Okay, well, I believe that's all of my questions. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. You've been
and
very...
no one else asked those questions before, sir. Let me just tell you.
Is he telling the truth, Mr. Chairman?
As far as the chair is recognized, yes.
That young lady beside you, I trust her. So, all right.
With that, the gentleman yields, and with that, I recognize the all-patient Mr. Huizinga. Matter of fact, for 7.5 minutes.
Yes, give
by special privilege,
time, please.
Well, I appreciate that. I do have a 1 o'clock meeting, but my apologies. Earlier today, I was passing a bill through the House Financial Services Committee dealing with Iran sanctions, and that, obviously, in light of what has happened with Hamas, is very important. But one of the lessons that we've learned is about the fungibility of money. And so that's what I want to kind of pursue. And my colleague was asking about that equipment value and those kinds of things, what was left literally on the battlefield for the Taliban to pick up. And I thought it was interesting. I had one of my other colleagues was kind of trying to make the point, I think, that the U.S. government doesn't officially recognize the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan. That might actually be true, but we also do know that we sure do communicate with them. We sure do cooperate with them. And certainly we've been sending them money through various channels. And to think that somehow that's not fungible is naive, I think, to be generous with that. Mr. Sopko, I read a little bit about your background. You were a former staffer on the Hill, correct?
Almost 25 years. Almost 25 years.
Well, former staffers unite. At some point, sometimes we actually get into some interesting positions. But my point is actually what we're supposed to be doing, right? Which is oversight, which is holding an administration accountable, regardless of who it is. SIGAR was created, if I recall correctly, and signed into law by President Bush. You were appointed by President Obama, correct? You served through the Trump administration and now serving through this administration. And yet, if I recall hearing you earlier, this is probably the least cooperative you have seen the State Department. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would say that.
Okay.
Yes, this is the least cooperative that the
That's
State
troubling.
Department's been.
That's troubling, and we've seen it on this committee. In my other committee work, I used to chair the subcommittee that had oversight of the IMF and the World Bank, and it just seems outrageous. And former ambassador Representative Wagner was talking about this. It's outrageous that this committee, and by extension you, and by extension us, are getting stonewalled like that. It's our responsibility to get that information from you and from them. It's your responsibility to get that information, and yet they refuse to do that. So that, I think, is going to be a challenge for us moving forward. I've got very generous of the chair to grant me some additional time and because of this patience. But can I ask one very specific question about the equipment that has been used? Is there any evidence that any of that equipment has made its way into battlefields or into countries in the Middle East or Ukraine? That has been, there's been allegations of that. Are you aware of any evidence of that being the case?
I'm not aware of any evidence of that, and we haven't looked at it either. So we haven't, but we've seen the press reports, but we have no evidence.
Well, I guess I've got a request for you. Please take a look at that, and it'd be helpful if the State Department would cooperate on that. Certainly, I want to touch on the Afghan board, the funds board of trustees. There's 4 members currently. Is that correct?
4 or 5? 4. Yes, 4. Yes, 5. I think 5.
5. Okay. I saw that there was going to be 2 that were added. Who are these people? What is their background? I mean, we know in the central bank, there's people. There's at least 3 senior Taliban leaders that are currently sanctioned by the UN who sit on their central bank board, including the director and the deputy director.
There are 2 Afghans that were appointed to the board. There's a Treasury Department official and a Swiss official. I
U.S.
apologize.
Treasury
There's
official.
only 4 individuals.
Okay.
One of the Afghan officials is currently, I'm trying to think his exact title. He's on the Supreme Council of the Afghan Central Bank. So the question we have about that is that a conflict of interest? And is the Supreme Council, which this is the Supreme Council of the current Afghan bank, so that's a Taliban Afghan central bank.
Correct. That would seem like a conflict to me, because if I'm reading this correctly, the Afghan fund could be authorized to release these dollars, correct?
That's correct. That's
okay.
what its purpose was.
And so they're going to go into the DAB, the central bank, which this person sits on, which we know there are Taliban officials on. So isn't it seem a little bit of a stretch that State Department's not aware of this or wouldn't be fighting against that?
Sir, you know, I have a problem with the whole concept, which Mr. West and no one has really explained to us. How in God's name are you going to try to recapitalize the central bank, which is controlled by the Taliban, without helping the Taliban? I mean, maybe I'm just a simple country lawyer from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio, okay?
Well,
but I
like you.
What's that?
Despite that, I like you, being
okay.
from Michigan.
Yeah, I know. But I used to work for John Dingell. But I just cannot fathom it. And again, maybe I've been doing this job too long. Maybe I've been reading too many audits. But can somebody please explain that to somebody? How the heck are you going to do it? Now, maybe this is, again, a mirage, like I talk about, a facade. We're helping the Afghans, but we're not helping the Afghans. I don't know. That's a policy decision that you all should ask. But I just don't know how to do that.
I agree. But to do that, we need information. You can help us with that, but you need information.
We're giving
correct?
you as much information.
Yeah, no,
and this report should be ready for your perusal in another month, we hope.
Oh, and I appreciate that, and I believe that you are doing everything that you can do. But you have given us chapter and verse about how you have been stymied with your ability to get that information from State Department and others. And I'm glad to hear USAID is cooperating more. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this. I'm gonna leave it with this, because John Dingell actually was very good to me when I came in 2010. And he taught me a couple of things. One of those was he called it the tyranny of the vote, which it doesn't matter who you're with, what you're doing, or how far away you are. They ring the bells, we have to go. The other thing that he taught me was the value and the importance and the constitutional obligation, frankly, we have. And he certainly did that with the famous Dingell-grams, holding any and all administrations accountable. This, in my opinion, this administration has been some of the least accountable when it comes to this, and I think your testimony has buttressed that. So I, sir, am going to be pledging to work with you to make sure that this administration gets you the information you need to do your job so we can do our job. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence, and I yield back.
Well, thank you very much, and we're happy to help you and any other member of this committee on that.
With that, the gentleman yields, and with that, I grant myself an unlimited amount of time because this is an interesting topic for me, and I'm actually very pleased that you're here with us today. Thank you. I'm going to revisit what you had said about the weapons. And I know there's no way to track weapons you don't have your hands on. In other words, you don't have serial numbers. We can't track numbers that we don't know. With that said, we've had our weapons, you know, the M4A1 carbine has been seen in the hands of Hamas and Pakistani militants over in Kashmir. I'm sure it's in other places. In your opinion, and this is all theorized, but this is based on an education. You're probably one of the more educated people on this topic. Where else could those weapons come from other than Afghanistan? I mean, we have pretty tight controls on the other weapons that we've disseminated throughout the world. Where else could they be coming from other than the mass weapons storages that we had in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I hate to say that. There is another conflict going on in Ukraine, and
Certainly.
we're shipping weapons like crazy over there. I don't know if those weapons are the same kind. I don't really know.
So on that topic, I happen to be an expert on that topic.
Oh.
I've been over to Ukraine. I've seen the tracking and the serialization at nausea. With the scanning process, they have an account for every single serialized weapon and munition, for that matter. So I'm pretty sure we have pretty good accountability there. So where else could it come from?
Well, just the difference. I know the DODIG has been looking in Ukraine, and there are some questions about how good a job we're doing, but hopefully it's improved. Afghanistan is a likely place. It was a weapons bazaar before, and it's a weapons bazaar probably now. I don't see any change. The only difference is the government isn't cooperating. They at least used to cooperate with us, the prior Ghani regime, but it was a total weapons bazaar. It's equipment. Now, you're assuming all the equipment that the Taliban has, they got after they kicked the Ghani government out. The Taliban, I mean, we were getting information that the Taliban basically told their people, don't buy weapons. We're getting it already from the Ghani regime. Yeah. So there was a lot of weapons flowing out before the collapse of the Ghani government.
Excellent point. As a matter of fact, when you mentioned the $7 billion that the Taliban got their hands on, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because most of the weapons actually came from the Afghani government that were basically handed over without a fight.
Sure.
It was turned over. That's part of the botched withdrawal that we did.
Or stolen beforehand. I mean, we did that chapter and verse on audits about how horrible the accounting was. And DOD's accounting of weapons was just horrible. in Afghanistan. So I hope it's improved in Ukraine. I haven't looked. It's not my job.
Couldn't agree with you more. As a matter of fact, I was there in 2016, and the interpreters used to talk about this all the time, how there's a severe lack of accountability, not just on weapons, but on vehicle parts, sending the wrong parts, oversight in general, and accountability. Once you point out something with your CIGAR or IG, and I want to point, by the way, for the uneducated public, in an attempt to educate them on the difference between an IG and a CIGAR. And if you could just kind of break this down, in your experience, did your office receive special hiring authorities from Congress, and how that differentiates between the IG and the CIGAR? If you could explain that real briefly.
Oh, yeah. We were given that authority because we're a temporary agency. So we have special authorities for pay and special authorities. And when we go out of existence, we go out of existence. Our employees, they're on a contract, an annual contract, or a little bit, I think 13 months, so they can get health benefits. But that's the benefit of having a special IG. We're temporary. I'm a firm believer in temporary agencies.
And it also has a little more authority, if I understand correctly.
We can look at the whole of government, and that's important. And I've talked about this before in relationship to other places in the world. That's a really helpful situation where you can follow everybody's money. The problem is the DOD IG, let's say, can only look at DOD programs. Aid IG can only look at aid programs. State can only look at state. And it's the same thing with Homeland Security and all that. You gave us the authority to look at any U.S. dollars spent in Afghanistan on reconstruction, and by any agency. So we looked at the FAA, we looked at the FDIC, we looked at every agency, and there's common themes. You know, if they're stealing from one U.S. government agency, they're stealing from another. And they're also stealing from the money given to the UN. So you allowed us to look at the UN, the World Bank, and all that, which was a fantastic opportunity. I firmly believe in whole of government and whole of governments. And you really need to have somebody able to look at that.
As do I, and that's why I put an IG in the provisions for the Ukraine.
Oh, did you? Oh,
yes,
good.
I did. So I'm
Thank
happy
you.
about that. Yeah.
Congratulations. It's not us, but I think that's a good point to do.
Now, when we look at Afghanistan as it exists now, we could probably agree there's terrorist training bases there, correct?
Yes.
I think around 27 is the last count I heard. I don't know if,
I think so. I think the UN gave 27. I think
that's what I've heard also. And the fact that we're still giving money to a regime that, as you said, and I quote from an earlier statement, thieves don't advertise what they steal. They probably also don't advertise what they spend their money on. Would you agree on that too?
Correct.
Okay, so I can safely assume that if you're harboring 27 terrorist bases and you've done things complicit with terrorist activities, that you're probably, some of that money that we're literally sending to the Taliban could, in fact, be used to support these training facilities.
You're absolutely correct, and that's a concern we have.
I want to let that sink into the American public. American taxpayer dollars that we work for and we give to the American government semi-willingly are being used to fund terrorist bases, training people to attack Americans and their interests around the world. I want that to sink in.
Well, sir, we haven't documented that. We've documented
Let's just
everything.
say that it's a clear possibility.
Clear possibility, and that's the distinction between
The fact that we allow that possibility to exist is far beyond egregious. But, well, I'll leave it at that because you and I agree on this.
Yeah. But I could say that's the distinction between the theft and diversion of the prior regime. That usually just went to corrupt officials, and it may have ended up in Northern Virginia or California where they invested their money, or Dubai, but we were pretty certain it wasn't going to terrorist organizations. That's the problem. That's the concern. I said in my statement that this group are a bunch of terrorists. And so very likely it's going to end up the money being diverted to terrorism.
Yeah, so we went from corrupt to evil. Great. As you stated in your this is my last question, but I think it's very germane to what we're trying to cover today. You stated to the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, the Biden administration has not at all been helpful to you in your investigations. And you said in your testimony, and I quote, Due to the refusal of the state and USAID to fully cooperate with SIGAR, I cannot report to this committee or to the American people on the extent to which our government may be funding the Taliban and other nefarious groups with U.S. taxpayer dollars. We simply do not know, since the Department of State, USAID, the UN, and other agencies are refusing to give us basic information that we or any other oversight body would need to ensure safe stewardship of tax dollars, which supports what we were just talking about. What can Congress do to reverse that trend and bring back accountability for the very dollars that we're responsible for and, indeed, the safety of our country?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned to somebody else who asked the question is, I mean, you know, a formal letter from the committee, a bipartisan, you know, because that sends a bigger message. Bipartisan letter saying, please, you know, or provide the information. I don't know if you can do that. That's helped in the past. I think asking state, as I said, USAID has turned around on, you know, they've been very helpful now. I don't mean to criticize USAID, and that's in part because of letters from committees like this. You just need to break through with state.
So that's the crazy thing. I've worked with USAID. I've been over to Bangladesh, and I've seen Cox's Bazar, and I've seen the amazing work they've done. They do some amazing things.
They do.
Almost miraculous things.
They do.
What is the deal with the state? Why are they resisting accountability? Why is the Biden administration hiding instead of being transparent what they're trying to do? $1 million question.
You gotta ask them. You know, that's what I can say. I'm a former prosecutor, and I don't know if your background, you were a former prosecutor or defense attorney or whatever, but
I'm just a Marine, simple Marine.
Just a Marine. Okay, when somebody, let's go use Shakespeare. He protesteth too much. I always wonder what motivates people. I mean, if that's my personal opinion. This isn't an audit and all of that. My personal opinion is, same with yours. What are they trying to hide? I mean, is it worse than we have already uncovered? I don't know. I remember, I think it was Joe Dunford, another Marine, who I remember telling me, he says, you know, John, every time you come here, you uncover a rock and something ugly comes out. So how do we stop that? And he didn't try to stop me. He said, how do we stop it beforehand? And I created a program to try to do that. These are the type of questions, these are the type of things that we used to deal with the State Department and aid and state, and we used to help them to stop the ugly things from crawling out underneath the rocks. If you don't identify the problem, you're never going to fix it.
Amen.
And that's my concern.
Thank you. With that, I thank the witness for his valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witness, and will ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to the committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to the length limitations. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.